The stars outside the observation window looked the same as they always did: cold, distant, and endless. Commander Ethan Cole stood with his hands behind his back, watching the darkness of space stretch out before his ship. The Starward Dawn had been on patrol for 3 weeks now, moving along the border between human space and Corvin territory. Nothing exciting had happened. Nothing ever happened on these patrols. Ethan was a tall man, with tired eyes and gray hair at his temples. He had served in the Earth fleet for 20 years, and he had learned that space was mostly empty. Most days passed without incident. Ships moved from one point to another, cargo was transported, and life continued in its quiet, boring way. He was about to return to his quarters when the communication officer called out from her station. Lieutenant Amy Ford was young, barely 25, with sharp eyes and quick hands. She had been staring at her screen with a confused expression for several seconds before she spoke. "Commander, I am picking up a distress signal," she said. "It is weak, but it is definitely there." Ethan walked over to her station and looked at the data on her screen. The signal was coming from a ship about 2 hours away at standard speed. The ship's identification marked it as Velkari, a reptilian species known for keeping to themselves. They were traders and merchants, not warriors. They rarely got involved in the conflicts between other species. "Can you identify the nature of the distress?" Ethan asked. Amy shook her head. "The signal is too weak. The ship appears to be drifting." "No engine activity detected," Ethan considered his options. The Velkari were not allies of humanity, but they were not enemies either. They simply existed, trading with whoever would buy and selling to whoever would pay. Helping them would not earn humanity any special favor, and ignoring them would not cause any political problems. But Ethan had not joined the fleet to ignore people in trouble. He had joined because he believed in doing the right thing, even when no one was watching. "Set a course," he ordered. "Let us see what is happening." The Starward Dawn changed direction and accelerated toward the drifting ship. As they got closer, the sensors revealed more details. The Velkari vessel was a cargo ship, designed for carrying goods between star systems. It showed signs of damage, possibly from weapons fire. The life support systems were failing. And there was only one life sign on board. Ethan assembled a rescue team and led them personally. He had always believed that a commander should not ask his crew to take risks he was not willing to take himself. They boarded the Velkari ship through an emergency airlock and found themselves in darkness. The power was almost completely gone. The air was thin and cold. They moved through the ship carefully, following the life sign on their scanners. They found the Velkari merchant in the cargo hold, huddled against a wall for warmth. He was a reptilian creature with green scales and large yellow eyes. His name, they would later learn, was Sylvath. But Sylvath was not alone. Lying on a makeshift bed of cargo blankets was a young human woman. She was unconscious, her skin pale, and her breathing shallow. She looked like she had not eaten properly in weeks, and there were marks on her wrists that told a story Ethan did not want to imagine. "What is this?" Ethan asked, his voice harder than he intended. Sylvath looked up at him with exhausted eyes. The Velkari was clearly near death himself, but his first words were not about his own survival. "Please," Sylvath said in broken English. "Help her first. She has suffered much." Ethan knelt beside the woman and checked her vital signs. She was alive, but barely. He ordered his medic to begin treatment immediately, then turned back to Sylvath. "Who is she? How did she get here?" Sylvath's story came out slowly, interrupted by coughing and exhaustion. The woman's name was Grace Miller. She had been captured by Draxian slavers 3 months ago, during a raid on a human colony called New Haven. The Draxians were a powerful species who believed that strength gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. They had been raiding human settlements for years, taking prisoners and selling them as slaves to other species across the galaxy. Sylvath had discovered Grace in a Draxian holding cell during a routine trade stop. She had been scheduled for sale the next day. When he looked into her eyes, he saw something that broke his heart. She was terrified, yes, but she was also still fighting. Even after everything she had been through, she had not given up. He could not explain why he did what he did next. Perhaps it was because she reminded him of his own daughter, who had died many years ago. Perhaps it was simply because he could not stand by and watch an innocent person suffer. Whatever the reason, Sylveth used his entire life savings to purchase Grace from the Draxians. Every credit he had earned over 40 years of trading, gone in a single transaction. Then he had hidden her on his ship and tried to reach human space. But the Draxians had discovered his deception and sent ships to intercept him. They had damaged his vessel and left him to drift, assuming he would die in the cold of space. Ethan listened to this story in silence. When Sylveth finished, the commander did not know what to say. This Valkyrie, a member of a species that had no alliance with humanity, had sacrificed everything to save a woman he did not know. Why? Ethan finally asked. Why would you do this for a human? Sylveth looked at Grace, who was being carried to the rescue shuttle by the medical team. His yellow eyes were soft with something that looked very much like love. Because she needed help, Sylveth said simply. And I could give it. Is that not reason enough? Ethan helped Sylveth to his feet and supported him as they walked back to the starward dawn. The Valkyrie was weak and needed medical attention, but he would survive. Grace would need more care, but she would survive too. As they left the dying cargo ship behind, Ethan made a decision. He would send a full report to Earth Command immediately. This was not just a rescue mission anymore. This was evidence of something much larger and much darker. The Draxians had been taking human prisoners. They had been selling human beings as slaves. And the galactic community had done nothing to stop them. Ethan did not know what would happen next. He did not know that his report would be read by the President of Earth within hours of its transmission. He did not know that Grace Miller's story would be shared across every human world in the coming days. He did not know that Sylva's act of kindness would change the course of galactic history. All he knew was that he had found a brave alien who had risked everything for a stranger, and a young woman who had survived horrors that no one should ever face. He would make sure their story was heard. The starward dawn turned toward Earth and engaged its engines. Behind them, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant and endless. But something had changed. A small spark had been lit in the darkness. It would soon grow into a fire that would burn across the galaxy. The United Earth Council chamber was silent. 50 representatives from every nation on Earth sat in their seats. Staring at the holographic display that floated in the center of the room, the display showed medical images, testimony recordings, and intelligence reports. It showed the face of Grace Miller, hollow-eyed and scarred. It showed the names of other humans who had disappeared over the years. Hundreds of names that had been dismissed as accidents or exploration casualties. Admiral Patricia Hayes stood at the podium, her uniform crisp and her expression controlled. She was a woman of 60 years, with silver hair, cut short, and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had been in the fleet for most of her life. She'd always believed that patience and diplomacy were the best tools for solving problems. But as she looked at the evidence before her, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt angry. The Draxian Empire has been conducting raids on human settlements for at least 7 years. She said, her voice steady despite her emotions. We have confirmed evidence of at least 300 human citizens being captured and sold into slavery. The actual number is likely much higher. A murmur passed through the chamber. Representative Carlos Martinez of the South American Federation raised his hand. How is this possible? He asked. We have diplomatic relations with the Draxians. We have signed treaties with them. Admiral Hayes nodded. We have signed treaties, yes. But the Draxian Empire does not honor treaties with species they consider inferior. To them, humans are simply another resource to be exploited. The murmur grew louder. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for about a century. In that time, they had worked hard to prove themselves as peaceful and cooperative members of interstellar society. They had traded fairly, honored their agreements, and avoided conflict whenever possible. They had believed that this approach would earn them respect and protection. They had been wrong. President Linda Carter entered the chamber through a side door. She was a woman in her late 50s, with dark skin and tired eyes. She had been president for 6 years, and she had spent most of that time trying to improve humanity's standing in the galaxy. She had believed in diplomacy. She had believed in the galactic system. Now she stood before her people, and her face showed a mixture of sorrow and cold determination. "I've read Commander Cole's report," she said. "I have spoken W. Ith Grace Miller? I have reviewed all the evidence, and I have reached a decision." The chamber fell completely silent. For 50 years, humanity has tried to prove itself to the galaxy. We have been patient. We have been kind. We have followed every rule and respected every custom. And how has the galaxy repaid us? They have ignored our pleas for justice. They have looked away while our people were stolen from their homes. They have treated us as if we do not matter. Her voice grew harder with each word. "No more. We will not petition the Galactic Assembly for help that will never come. We will not file diplomatic complaints that will be buried in bureaucracy. If the galaxy will not protect our people, then we will protect them ourselves." The vote that followed was unanimous. Earth would go to war. While the council made its decision, another meeting was taking place in a smaller room in the same building. Sylveth, the Velkari, sat in a comfortable chair, wrapped in a warm blanket and holding a cup of hot tea. Human doctors had treated his injuries, and human officials had provided him with food and shelter. He had expected none of this. He had expected to be questioned harshly, perhaps even blamed for the situation he had caused. Instead, a kind woman named Director Susan Park sat across from him. Smiling gently, "Mr. Sylveth," she said, "on behalf of the people of Earth, I want to thank you for what you did. You saved one of our people. You risked your life for a stranger. We will never forget that." Sylveth did not know how to respond. In his experience, governments did not thank people. They made demands and issued orders. "I only did what anyone should do," he said quietly. Susan shook her head. "No, you did what very few people have the courage to do, and we want to show you how much that means to us." She handed him a folder containing official documents. Sylveth read them slowly, his yellow eyes growing wider with each page. Full citizenship in the United Earth government. A new ship to replace the one he had lost. A permanent home on Earth, if he wanted it. And a financial award large enough that he would never need to worry about money again. "I do not understand," Sylveth said. "Why would you give me all of this?" "I am not human." Suzanne leaned forward, her expression serious but warm. "Because humanity believes in rewarding kindness. You did not know Grace. You had no reason to help her. But you did anyway, because it was the right thing to do. That is the kind of person we want in our society. That is the kind of person we want to call a friend." Sylveth felt something he had not felt in many years. He felt tears forming in his eyes. Among his own people, he had always been considered strange. He cared too much about others. He made decisions based on emotion rather than profit. His fellow Valkyrie had often told him that this weakness would be his downfall. Now, for the first time in his life, he was being told that his kindness was valuable, that it mattered, that he mattered. "Thank you," he whispered. "I do not have words to express what this means to me." Susan reached out and took his hand. Her skin was warm against his cold scales. "You saved one of us," she said. "That makes you one of us now." News of Sylveth's reward spread across human space within days. People who had never met him spoke his name with respect and gratitude. Children drew pictures of the brave alien who had saved a human woman. Songs were written about his courage. He became a symbol of everything humanity believed in, that kindness should be rewarded, that courage should be honored. And that species did not matter when it came to doing the right thing. The galaxy watched all of this with confusion. Humans were preparing for war against one of the most powerful empires in known space. They should have been focused entirely on military matters. Instead, they were celebrating an alien merchant who had done nothing more than show. Basic decency. The other species did not understand. They could not understand. To them, war was about power and resources and territory. The idea of going to war over a single person, over a principle, was completely foreign to their way of thinking. But this was exactly why humanity was different. This was exactly why they would be so dangerous when they finally showed their true strength. President Carter addressed the people of Earth in a broadcast that reached every human. Settlement in the galaxy. "We do not seek this war," she said. "We have never wanted conflict, but we have learned a painful lesson. The galaxy does not respect peace. The galaxy does not reward patience. The galaxy only respects strength. So we will show them our strength. We will show them what it means to harm a human being, and we will bring our people home." The broadcast ended, and humanity began to prepare for battle. Ships were assembled. Soldiers were trained. Weapons were manufactured. The quiet, peaceful species that the galaxy had ignored for so long was waking up, and when it was fully awake, the galaxy would learn to fear it. The Draxian ambassador received the human transmission in his private chambers aboard the Imperial station. His name was Crystal, and he was one of the most powerful diplomats in the Draxian Empire. He had negotiated treaties with a dozen species. He had ended wars and started them. He believed with complete certainty that he understood how the galaxy worked when he watched the human message. He laughed. Admiral Patricia Hayes appeared on his screen, her expression cold and her voice steady. She delivered humanity's terms without emotion or hesitation. All human prisoners were to be released immediately. Reparations would be paid to the families of those who had died in captivity. Every official involved in the slave trade would face trial before a joint tribunal. The Draxian Empire had 72 hours to comply. "If these terms are not met," Admiral Hayes said, "then a state of war will exist between the United Earth Government and the Draxian Empire. We will not negotiate. We will not delay. We will act." Crystal ended the transmission before it was finished. He called his assistant and ordered a drink, still chuckling to himself. "These humans are amusing," he said. "They believe they can threaten us. The Draxian Empire has conquered 100 worlds. We have the largest fleet in this sector of the galaxy. And these soft creatures think they can challenge us?" His assistant, a younger Draxian named Vexener, looked uncertain. "Ambassador, perhaps we should take this seriously. The humans have developed impressive technology in a very short time. Their ships are more advanced than expected." Crystal waved his hand dismissively. "Technology means nothing without the will to use it. Humans are weak. They spend their time talking about feelings and morality. They do not have the stomach for real war. When they see our fleet, they will surrender immediately." He did not bother to send a response to the human ultimatum. In his mind, silence was the most appropriate answer. Let the humans wait and worry. Let them understand how insignificant they were in the grand scheme of galactic politics. This would prove to be the greatest mistake of his life. Across the galaxy, other species watched the situation develop with varying degrees of interest. The Valkyrie, inspired by Silva's example, quietly began to discuss whether they should offer assistance to humanity. They were not a military species, but they controlled important trade routes. Their support could make a significant difference. The Tyranni, a warrior species with deep respect for strength and honor, observed the humans with new eyes. They had always dismissed humanity as too peaceful, too concerned with cooperation. But the Tyranni also believed that the greatest warriors were those who fought for a cause greater than themselves. Watching humans prepare to go to war over one of their own, the Tyranni began to reconsider their assessment. Even the ancient Eldari, a species that rarely involved itself in the affairs of younger races, took notice. They had seen many civilizations rise and fall over the millennia. They had seen empires built on conquest crumble into dust. But they had rarely seen a species that fought not for power, but for principle. It reminded them of their own ancient past. Before they had grown old and tired and withdrawn from galactic affairs, the Hive Collective, a mysterious insectoid species that communicated as a single mind, sent a message to human space. The message contained only 5 words: "We are watching with interest." No one knew exactly what this meant, but it was the first time the Hive had acknowledged humanity's existence at all, back on Earth. Admiral Hayes assembled her fleet in the space above the planet. 200 warships of various sizes gathered in formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the sun. 50 carrier vessels joined them, each one carrying hundreds of smaller fighter craft. And at the center of the formation floated something new, a battleship class that had never been revealed to the galactic community. The ship was called the Resolute, and it represented everything humanity had learned in its century among the stars. It was not the largest ship in the galaxy, but it was one of the most advanced. Its weapon systems were beyond anything the Draxians had ever encountered. Its defensive shields could withstand sustained bombardment. Its engines could outrun most pursuit vessels. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking out at the fleet she had assembled. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. These ships, these people, were following her into battle. Many of them might not return, but she also felt something else. She felt pride. Pride in the men and women who had volunteered to serve. Pride in the engineers and scientists who had built these magnificent ships. Pride in humanity's refusal to accept injustice, even when fighting against it seemed impossible. The 72 hours passed without any response from the Draxian Empire. Admiral Hayes addressed her fleet through a ship-wide broadcast that reached every vessel in the formation. "Today we go to war," she said. "We do not go because we enjoy fighting. We do not go because we seek conquest or glory. We go because our people have been taken from us. We go because our brothers and sisters are suffering in chains. We go because the galaxy has told us that our lives do not matter, and we refuse to accept that lie." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Will not promise you an easy victory. The Draxians are powerful, and they will fight hard to keep what they have stolen. But I promise you this, we will not stop until every human prisoner is free. We will not rest until justice is served. And we will show the galaxy what happens when you harm one of our own." The fleet acknowledged her words with a roar of voices across thousands of communication channels. Pilots and soldiers and engineers all raised their voices together in a sound that echoed through the void of space. Admiral Hayes gave the order to engage the jump drives. The ships began to disappear one by one, vanishing into the strange space between stars. They would emerge in Draxian territory in a matter of hours. They would emerge ready for war. On the Imperial Station, Ambassador Crystal was enjoying a meal when his assistant burst into his chambers with news that made the food turn to ash in his mouth. "Ambassador, the human fleet has entered our space. They are heading directly for Corax Prime." Crystal stood so quickly that he knocked his plate to the floor. Corax Prime was one of the most important worlds in the Draxian Empire. It housed their largest slave facilities, their primary military shipyard, and the offices of some of their most senior government officials. "Impossible," he said. "How did they get through our border defenses?" "They did not use our jump gates," the assistant replied, his voice trembling. "They have their own jump technology. We did not detect them until they were already inside our territory." For the first time in his long career, Ambassador Crystal felt fear. The humans had not been bluffing. They had not been negotiating. They had simply told him what they intended to do, and now they were doing it. He reached for his communication, his device to send word to the Imperial fleet. But even as he gave the orders, he knew deep in his heart that everything had changed. The humans were coming, and they were not going to stop until they had what they came for. The war had begun. The Battle of Corax Prime began at dawn, local time. Not that dawn meant much in space, where the sun was just another star among millions. But the Draxian commanders had positioned their defensive fleet in a traditional formation. Facing the direction they expected the humans to appear, they had 300 warships arranged in neat lines, ready to overwhelm the enemy with superior numbers. Admiral Hayes did not attack from the expected direction. The human fleet emerged from jump space in 3 separate groups. One appeared behind the Draxian formation. One appeared above it. And one appeared below it. Before the Draxian commanders could adjust their positions, they found themselves surrounded. Fleet Commander Zarkath of the Draxian Navy stared at his tactical display in disbelief. This was not how wars were fought. Battles in space followed certain rules, certain traditions. Ships faced each other directly. They exchanged fire and organized volleys. They retreated when damaged and regrouped for the next engagement. The humans did not follow these rules. Admiral Hayes had studied human military history extensively. She knew that her species had spent thousands of years fighting among themselves, developing tactics and strategies that other species had never imagined. While the galaxy had achieved peace through expansion, humans had achieved survival through adaptation. "Execute attack pattern Delta," she ordered calmly. The human fleet moved like a living thing, each ship knowing its role and executing it perfectly. Fighter craft swarmed toward the Draxian battleships, drawing their defensive fire away from the larger human vessels. Meanwhile, the human battleships targeted the Draxian command ships, removing their leadership one by one. The Draxians tried to respond, but their communication systems were jammed. Their sensors were confused by human electronic warfare. Their shields, which had never been tested against human weapons, failed much faster than expected. Within 2 hours, the Draxian fleet was in chaos. Fleet Commander Zarkath watched his ships explode around him and felt something he had never experienced in his military career. He felt defeat, not the temporary setback of a battle lost, but the crushing realization that he had completely underestimated his enemy. He ordered a retreat, hoping to save what remained of his fleet. But the humans were faster. They intercepted the fleeing ships and destroyed or captured them with ruthless efficiency. By the end of the 6th hour, the Battle of Corax Prime was over. Of the 300 Draxian ships, only 42 escaped. The humans had lost 23 vessels. While the space battle raged above, Captain Nathan Price led the ground assault on Corax Prime's surface. His Marine unit had trained for this mission specifically, studying the layout of the slave facilities and the behavior patterns of Draxian guards. They landed their transport ships a mile from the main compound and approached on foot. Using the planet's rocky terrain for cover, the Draxian ground forces were confused by the battle in space and did not notice the human Marines until they were already inside the perimeter. Nathan was a young man, only 32 years old, but he had the eyes of someone who had seen terrible things. He had grown up on New Haven, the same colony where Grace Miller had been captured. He had lost friends to Draxian raids. He had spent years training for this moment. "Remember our rules of engagement?" he said to his squad as they moved through the facility. "We are here to rescue prisoners and capture those responsible. Unnecessary killing is not our purpose," the soldiers acknowledged with silent nods. They understood. They were not here for revenge. They were here for justice. The first building they entered housed slaves from multiple species. Not just humans, but Velker, Tirani, and others. The prisoners looked up at the human soldiers with fear in their eyes, expecting more cruelty. Instead, they received blankets, water, and medical attention. A young Valkyrie female approached Nathan with tears streaming down her scaled face. "You came for the humans," she said. "Why are you helping us too?" Nathan looked at her for a moment, then smiled gently. "Because you needed help," he said. "That is reason enough." The words echoed something that Sylvath had said months ago, a galaxy away. The young Valkyrie did not know this, but she would remember Nathan's answer for the rest of her life. The Marines cleared the facility building by building, freeing prisoners and arresting Draxian officials. When they found the overseers who had been responsible for the worst treatment of the slaves, they did not execute them. They did not torture them. They simply placed them in restraints, documented their identities, and prepared them for transport back to Earth for trial. This confused the Draxians more than anything else. In their culture, defeated enemies were killed or enslaved. The concept of a fair trial was foreign to them. They could not understand why the humans would waste time and resources on legal proceedings. But that was exactly the point. Humanity was not fighting to prove they were stronger than the Draxians. They were fighting to prove they were better. News of the victory at Corax Prime spread across the galaxy within hours. The species that had expected humanity to be crushed suddenly had to reconsider everything they thought they knew. The Valkyrie government announced that they would open their trade routes to human ships and refuse passage to Draxian vessels. This was an economic blow that the Empire had not anticipated. The Tirani High Council sent an official message to Earth, expressing their respect for human military tactics and their admiration for human honor. They did not offer an alliance yet. But the door was now open. Even species that had never interacted with humanity began to take notice. The crystalline singers of Harmonia 7, peaceful species that communicated through music, composed a symphony in honor of the human warriors who fought for freedom. The builders of the Outer Rim, ancient machine intelligences that rarely acknowledged organic life, sent a single transmission. Interesting. The war continued for another 11 weeks after Corax Prime. Human ships appeared in Draxian space without warning. Striking targets that should have been invulnerable, they destroyed shipyards and freed slave populations. They captured supply lines and isolated military bases. The Draxian Empire, which had not faced a serious threat in centuries, began to crack. Generals blamed each other for defeats. Politicians demanded explanations that no one could provide. The Emperor himself retreated to his palace and refused to speak to anyone. Through it all, Admiral Hayes maintained her discipline and her principles. She did not allow her forces to commit atrocities. She did not permit the targeting of civilian populations. She insisted that every captured Draxian be treated humanely and given access to legal representation. Some of her officers questioned these restrictions. Would it not be faster to simply destroy everything Draxian and end the war quickly? Admiral Hayes answered them with words that would be remembered for generations. "We are not fighting to become what they are," she said. "We are fighting to show what we are. If we abandon our principles to win, then we have already lost." The war ended 3 months after it began. The Draxian Empire, broken and humiliated, requested terms of surrender. Admiral Hayes accepted their request and prepared for the final chapter of this conflict. But even as she celebrated victory, she knew that the hardest part was still to come. The galaxy was watching to see what humanity would do with its power. Would they become conquerors like the Draxians? Would they seek revenge for the suffering their people had endured? The answer to that question would define humanity's place in the galaxy for centuries to come. The signing ceremony took place on Earth, in a great hall that had been built specifically for this purpose. Representatives from dozens of species filled the observation galleries, watching history unfold before their eyes. The Valkyrie delegation sat in a place of honor near the front. The Tyranni had sent their High Commander himself, a rare gesture of respect. Even the Eldari had emerged from their long isolation to witness this moment. President Linda Carter stood at the center of the hall, her expression calm, but her eyes showing the weight of everything that had led to this day. Across from her stood Emperor Drakthus of the Draxian Empire, a massive reptilian creature who had ruled his people for over a century. He looked diminished now, his scales dull and his posture bent. He was not accustomed to defeat. The terms of surrender had been negotiated over several weeks. Admiral Hayes had insisted on certain conditions that could not be compromised. Now President Carter read those terms aloud for the galaxy to hear. First, all prisoners held by the Draxian Empire will be released immediately. This includes humans and all other species who have been enslaved within Draxian territory. A murmur of surprise passed through the gathered aliens. They had expected humanity to demand only the release of their own people. The fact that they had fought for others as well was something new, something unexpected. Second, reparations will be paid to the families of all those who died in Draxian captivity. These funds will be used to provide support and healing for survivors and their communities. Emperor Drakthus nodded stiffly. The financial cost was significant, but it was nothing compared to what he had feared. All officials involved in the organization and operation of the slave trade will face trial before a joint tribunal. This tribunal will include representatives from human space, Draxian space, and neutral species who have agreed to participate in the pursuit of justice. This was the condition that had been hardest for the Draxians to accept. Many of those officials were high-ranking members of the imperial government, some related to the emperor himself, but Admiral Hayes had refused to negotiate on this point. Justice required accountability, and accountability required trials. Fourth, the Draxian Empire will sign a treaty guaranteeing the rights of all sentient beings within their territory. This includes the right to freedom from slavery, the right to fair treatment under law, and the right to seek assistance from outside powers if these rights are violated. The galaxy held its breath. Such a treaty had never existed before. The concept of universal rights that cross species boundaries was revolutionary. President Carter looked up from the document and met Emperor Drake's eyes. "These are our terms. Do you accept them?" The Emperor hesitated. For a moment, it seemed like he might refuse, might try to continue the war despite his broken fleet and fractured empire. But then his shoulders sagged, and he reached for the stylus that would bind his people to humanity's demands. "I accept," he said quietly. The signatures were applied, and the war officially ended. But the ceremony was not over. President Carter turned to face the observation galleries, where Grace Miller sat beside Sylveth. The young woman had recovered from her physical injuries, though the emotional scars would take longer to heal. She wore a simple dress and looked uncomfortable with the attention focused on her. "Grace Miller," President Carter said, "would you come forward?" Grace stood on unsteady legs and made her way to the center of the hall. Sylveth followed a few steps behind. Unwilling to leave her side, President Carter addressed the gathered representatives. This woman was taken from her home by slavers. She was tortured, starved, and treated as property. By every measure the galaxy uses to judge these things, she should have been forgotten. One person among billions? What did her life matter in the grand scheme of interstellar politics? She paused, letting the question hang in the air. But her life mattered to us. Every human life matters to us. We crossed the galaxy. We fought a war. We changed history itself, all to bring her home. Not because she was special or powerful or important by galactic standards, but because she was ours. Because she was a human being, and human beings do not abandon their own. Grace had tears in her eyes. So did many of the humans in the hall. And we did not do this alone. One person, a Valkyrie merchant named Sylveth, saw her suffering and chose to act. He sacrificed everything he had to save a stranger from another species. This is the kind of person we want in our society. This is the kind of courage we want to honor. President Carter turned to Sylveth, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "The people of Earth have chosen to award you the Medal of Humanity. This is the highest honor we can give to any being, human or otherwise. You will forever be remembered as a hero of our people, and you will always have a home among us." The medal was placed around Sylveth's neck, and the hall erupted in applause. The Valkyrie delegation was weeping openly. Even the stern Tyranny commander nodded his approval. When asked to speak, Grace stepped forward slowly. Her voice was soft but clear. "I do not know why Sylveth saved me. I was nobody special. I was just a person who needed help. But he helped me anyway, and then my people crossed the stars to bring me home. I hope the galaxy remembers this. I hope they remember that kindness matters, that courage matters, and that every life has value." She took Sylveth's hand and smiled at him. "Thank you for saving me." Sylveth squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for letting me." Admiral Patricia Hayes retired from active duty 1 year after the war ended. She had accomplished everything she set out to do. Human prisoners had been rescued. Justice had been served. And humanity had proven itself to the galaxy. In her final address, she stood before the officers who had served under her and offered them a message to carry forward. "We have shown the galaxy our strength," she said. "But strength alone is not what makes us dangerous. What makes us dangerous is that we care. We care about each other with a ferocity that other species cannot understand. We will cross any distance, face any enemy, pay any price to protect our own. And now the galaxy knows this." She paused, her eyes hard and certain. "To anyone who might threaten humanity in the future, I offer this warning. We do not seek war. We do not desire empire. We are happy to live in peace with any species that offers us the same courtesy. But if you take one of ours, if you harm those under our protection, then understand what you have done. You have awakened something that you cannot stop." The gallery was silent, hanging on her every word. There is no distance we will not cross. There is no enemy we will not face. There is no cost we will not pay to bring them home. This is who we are. This is what we believe. and this is why you should never ever give us a reason to come for you." Her speech was broadcast across the galaxy. It was translated into 100 languages and discussed on 1,000 worlds. Some species heard it as a threat. Others heard it as a promise. But all of them heard the same message. Humanity was different. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. The Valkyrie became humanity's closest allies, their trade routes creating economic bonds that benefited both species. The Tyranni formed a military alliance with Earth, their respect for human warriors transforming into genuine friendship. Even the Draxian Empire, humbled and reformed, slowly began to change its ways. Sylveth lived the rest of his life on Earth, surrounded by people who loved and honored him. He became a symbol of what was possible when different species chose kindness over fear. Grace Miller became an ambassador, traveling between worlds and telling her story to anyone who would listen. She dedicated her life to helping others who had suffered as she had, and humanity continued on its path among the stars. Feared by some and respected by all, they had proven that they would fight for each other. That made them the most terrifying species in the galaxy. Not because they were violent, because they cared.